Now that you have a handle on one of the biggest causes of comma confusion, we'll tackle some of the other important ground rules for using commas in sentences. Remember, you can always review these rules on the accompanying handout on the course website. In this lecture, I'll present the most important rules you need to know and provide examples for each rule. Use commas to separate independent clauses when they're joined by any of these 7 coordinating conjunctions: and, but, for, or, nor, so, yet. The game was over, but the crowd refused to leave. Use commas after introductory clauses, phrases, or words that fall before the main clause. You can often identify these introductory clauses by starter words such as after, although, as, because, if, since, when, and while. While I was eating, the cat scratched at the door. Because her alarm clock was broken, she was late for class. If you are ill, you should see a doctor. When the snow stops falling, we'll shovel the driveway. Note that this rule applies only to clauses that fall before the main clause. If they come after the main clause, you shouldn't use a comma. For example, the cat scratched at the door while I was eating. In that sentence, I didn't use a comma because the clause while I was eating falls after the main clause. Introductory phrases are like introductory clauses, but do not include a subject and verb. Common introductory phrases that should be followed by a comma include participial and infinitive phrases, as well as long prepositional phrases. Here are some examples. Having finished the test, he left the room. To get a seat, you'd better come early. After the test, but before lunch, I went jogging. Introductory words like yes, well, and however also need to be set apart by commas. Well, perhaps he meant no harm. Yes, the package should arrive tomorrow morning. However, you may not be satisfied by the results. Use a pair of commas in the middle of a sentence to set off clauses, phrases, and words that are not essential to the meaning of the sentence. Use one comma before to indicate the beginning of the pause and one at the end. These commas help the reader see the natural break that occurs when you interrupt a sentence with a non-essential element. For example, take a look at how I've set apart a non-essential phrase in this sentence. The lake, which is frozen, would be perfect for ice fishing. The essential elements of this sentence are the subject, lake, and the verb, would be. The non-essential clause, which is still frozen, interrupts these essential elements and therefore needs to be set apart by commas. Here are some clues to help you decide whether the sentence element is essential or not. If you leave out the clause, phrase, or word, does the sentence still make sense? Does the clause, phrase, or word interrupt the flow of words in the original sentence? If you move the element to a different position in the sentence, does the sentence still make sense? If you answer yes to one or more of these questions, then the element is non-essential and should be set off with commas. Here are some more examples of sentences with non-essential elements. This one has a non-essential clause. That Tuesday, which happens to be my birthday, is the only day when I am available to meet. In that sentence, we don't need to know that that day happens to be my birthday, and the sentence functions just fine without it, so it's non-essential. Here's one with a non-essential phrase. This restaurant has an exciting atmosphere. The food, on the other hand, is rather bland. Notice how we could cut out that phrase, on the other hand, with no real effect on the integrity of the sentence. Therefore, we know that it's non-essential, and we set it off with commas. Here's one with a non-essential word. I appreciate your hard work. In this case, however, you seem to have overexerted yourself. It's also important to be able to recognize an essential clause or phrase, since these must never be set apart by commas. The most common kind of essential clause you need to watch for are that clauses. That clauses often follow nouns. For example, the book that I borrowed from you is excellent. The apples that fell out of the basket are bruised. That clauses can also follow a verb expressing mental action. She believes that she will be able to earn an A. He is dreaming that he can fly. I contend that it was wrong to mislead her. They wished that warm weather would finally arrive. I'll give you a few more examples of other essential elements. Like that clauses, these also do not take commas. Students who cheat only harm themselves. Compare that essential clause to the non-essential clause in this example and note the different meaning of each sentence. Dishonest students who cheat only harm themselves. In this example, the clause who cheat simply gives us more information about the dishonest students, but it's not actually essential to the sentence. Here's one more example to show you the contrast. The baby wearing a yellow jumpsuit is my niece. Now, here's a version with a non-essential element. My niece, wearing a yellow jumpsuit, is playing in the living room. The candidate who had the least money lost the election. Governor Bob, who had the least money, lost the election. If you are ever confused about whether or not a phrase is essential, you can always refer back to the clues I gave you earlier in this lecture. We've now covered some of the trickier comma rules, so feel free to replay this lecture or ask questions. In the next lecture, we'll look at some of the easier but no less important comma rules.